Thank you all for being here. If you are here to learn about AGV casters, thank you. If you're here for just to get off the shop floor and take a break and sit down, thank you as well. My name is Patrick Lippert. I am the supply chain director at Hamilton Caster, and here is our esteemed panelists. We have Brian Kiger, the Chief Commercial Officer at Conveco, Alvar Diaz, the VP Sales and Marketing at P&H Caster, and Wes Moore, the Corporate Automation Business Manager at Shaw Industries. And let's get started.
So welcome again. Thank you for your participation. Hopefully you get a little bit of insight on what casters and AGVs and how they all correlate together. ICWM is an industry group, part of MHI. We're probably one of the oldest, I would say, within the MHI. You know, we were established in 1933. We consist of some great USA manufacturers. And, you know, while you may never have heard of some of the companies in our industry group, there's a great chance that you have probably pushed a cart somewhere in your lifetime with one of our members' casters and wheels. We span from logistics, material handling, all the way to some medical institutional. So our members are pretty present in all industries and facets. To give you an idea of who they are, here are 5 of them that are part of our membership group. You can find at least 3 of these that are showcasing here at MHI at Modex. So if you want more information, feel free to visit the MHI website or come by, stop by the booth, and we're glad to talk some more caster talk with you.
And this is me. As Patrick said, I'm Brian Kiger. When I'm not the Chief Commercial and Brand Officer at Conveco, I'm doing a lot in the Mobile Automation Group here with MHI. I'm actually the former chair. Actually been chair, vice chair, off and on for the last 12 years. So heavily involved and been with MHI for, going on 28 years working with these guys. So very involved. And the Mobile Automation Group plays actually a vital role as well, and very much tied to casters. As anyone will tell you, without the casters, we would not be the Mobile Automation Group, would we? So, but we play a vital role in the industry, doing a lot with market awareness, again, bringing the latest trends and insights to you guys so that you can make better decisions. We also provide market intelligence. So what are the growth rates? What's the market size? Where's this going? Again, helping you guys understand where the market is heading and what's going on in the market when it comes to mobile automation. We do a lot with thought leadership, as you can see here today, participating in the panel, working with our partners over here at ICWM. And then we do a lot of podcasts, webinars, whatever we can to do to get out there and just kind of lead the industry forward. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about safety. Safety is at the forefront of everything that the Mobile Automation Group does. We are very strong advocates of safety. And in turn, we will work together with our customers, or the clients out there, end users, as well as our OEMs, to make sure they're staying up to date on the latest safety standards, regulations, and getting them implemented into their systems. Very big on education. All of our members are really, really invested in education from multiple standpoints. One, we do a lot with Skills USA, which takes place here in Atlanta every year. Again, next generation workforce, that's the future for everyone, right? So how do we develop and get them engaged early on so that when they come into the industry, not only on our side of the table, but also for end users, come out more educated and ready to hit the ground running, or rolling in this case. But we also have an online educational piece called MAG 101. It's where you can go online and you can learn anything and everything from how to design an AGV, how to implement an AGV, the safety aspects of AGV. So it's a great resource for you. And then we do a lot, like I said, with standards, trying to influence and stay up to date with the latest standards. Every time new technology comes out, there's a new standard for it, right? And then with the new standard, someone wants to introduce a new acronym, but we try to reel that all back in. But our goal is to make sure that you understand the standards, and you are actually, your OEMs that you're working with are also up to date on the standards. So we have multiple companies in our group. It's grown. When I first started with the mobile automation group, we had 5 companies. So you can see we've grown quite a bit. We have a mix of executive memberships, which is basically your OEMs and system integrators, and then we have associate member companies as well. These are companies that are providing some type of supplemental technology that makes the AGV or an AMRs work. And this is anything from your sensors to your casters, which are important, all the way up to, even now AI and things like that. So again, we're growing rapidly and again, working very tightly with other industry groups now to kind of get a more concise message out to the industry.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, let's jump right in. We've got a question. When specifying the right casters and wheels, what are some key aspects you guys look for in those?
I think you have to think about first and foremost, right? The load capacity. Whenever you're designing an AGV or you're from an end user point of view, you're looking to purchase an AGV, you got to think about the load that's going to be carried on it, right? Because you got to make sure you have casters that support the required load capacity. And this really can drive your performance if you don't, but it also impacts many other things as well. Speed and performance, again, this is a big one. You're going to have some applications that are low speed, some applications that are high speed. And while it may be an afterthought to most people, it really should be considered because different types of casters suit lower speed applications versus the higher speed applications. So I think that's something that gets overlooked as well. Traction and stability. Again, when you think about your material on your casters, whether it be rubber, whether it be polyurethane, all these come into play when you're talking about the type of surfaces that you're going to be traveling on, especially when you get into wet environments or environments where you have a lot of loose debris on the floor. You got to think about that because you never want to compromise the stability of the vehicle. And then in some instances, we see noise reduction, right? I've been in so many plants that I can't hear myself think, and then you add an AGV on top of that or an AMR, and you really want to at least make sure that they're traveling as smoothly as possible. Anything to add to that, guys?
From an end user standpoint, when we've looked at projects, most of the time your OEMs didn't ask us or put in the specs of what caster they were using or wheel, that kind of thing. So I've learned the hard way on having to change things after the fact, and there'll be a slide later on. So as an end user, you just got to make sure that you ask these questions because a lot of times they're just going to put on there what they think's right for you rather than necessarily what you want.
Yeah, and I would add, when you're thinking about load capacity, you really have to think about what is the total payload, whether it's the unit itself, the rack that's going to go on it. And I typically like to say, you should consider about 25% above that. So when you take all of those and add them up, that's really where you should be looking to make sure that your application, your weight is going to fit what the right casters are going to be. And even when it comes to speed and performance, as Brian said, that's an important aspect because the faster that the AGV is going to go, the more precise bearing system you might need. You're going to need perhaps a different offset between the caster. I don't know if you've ever seen a caster that wobbles like this when it goes in top speeds. Well, if it's wobbling, guess what? That's energy loss that's happening. So you really got to consider how fast it's going to go. That's vibration that's happening. If it's vibrating, what happens to your sensors? They get out of whack. Now you have a safety issue on your hands. So speed really comes down to not only just safety, but really diving in into figuring out what's going to work best for my application.
It reminded me of something when you talk about the wobbling. You ever got the wrong cart at Walmart? Drives you crazy. Just think about that now. In a normal environment, in your production environment with an AGV, that's just going to wear. It's going to wear quickly, and it's going to create a lot of issues as far as performance. It's going to create a lot of issues it's going to drive your most anal people totally crazy. But it's really, it should not be an afterthought because it does have.
It should not be, yeah.
Well, also, that with the wobbling Brian was talking about, it could cause premature wear on your AGV. I've had some issues where the wiring, it rubbed against something else and caused a short. Well, that's because of the casters. It was just constantly that vibration. So they're the ground floor, what's touching that, the floor. So you got to really make sure you get the right spec.
And accuracy. When you're docking an AGV into whether it be a conveyor or a stand, the accuracy can be highly impacted if you got a wobbly caster.
It does a lot of bad things.
Yes.
So, and even noise reductions, I've had people come and say, look, I don't want it to say, I just want it to be really, really quiet. I want a very soft material that absorbs everything. I'm like, okay, no problem. We can do that. But you run into the issue, there's a trade-off sometimes. And that trade-off is the softer you go, more deformation happens. It means your load capacity is going to go down. So you may not be able to get both of both worlds. And so you're going to have think about what that trade-off is going to be. So these are the kinds of things that as you look to get into AGVs, you're looking for your own business. Now, these are the kinds of questions you should be asking manufacturers.
100%.
Are there other things we should consider when thinking of AGV and casters?
Absolutely. I mean, your environmental factors, whether it be temperature, whether it be humidity. I even think about, when I think about environment, what happens if you have ramps? Most people think about maybe the battery, but that's good. But now you're considering load on a ramp, on an incline, and you stop halfway up. You ever been on a bicycle and then tried to get started again? You have all that slipping and sliding if your tires are worn. I mean, you got to think about things like this too, because that's inefficiencies in the warehouse that you got to address. So with making sure that you understand that weight could be on a vehicle and it could be on an incline, and you have to start on that incline. So you got to think about everything, really. I mean, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, when I think of environmental factors, I'm not just thinking just hot weather and cold weather. Sure, those are aspects. And you have to really think about what is the environment going to be? Do I have the wet conditions, and how do I battle that? But again, I kind of try to think about an AGV or a cart for that matter. It didn't even have to be AGV, but some of these are kind of common sense, I would say. If you think about what happens in cold climate, well, things stiffen, right? The material on the caster, maybe it's a urethane, it starts to harden a little bit. Well, that's less rolling resistance. How's that going to affect my battery life now if I'm in a cold environment and it's constantly doing it? Likewise, if I'm in a hot environment, that urethane can soften a little bit, deforms a little bit, flattens a little bit. Well, that's going to be a loss of energy and affect your battery life as well. It's aspects of just moisture control. One of the biggest, I would say, failures I see in casters in general is the bearing system. If you start to get moisture in there and they're not stainless steel bearings, it's a chemical wash down area, who knows? What ends up happening is the bearing, the grease gets washed out, it gets removed, you start grinding, and next thing you know, there's a bearing failure. You may not see that initially, and some people might even think, well, that's related to maybe my battery life is not good anymore. Maybe I need to switch batteries or get a new battery. And it could be a direct relation that there is friction now in that bearing system that's causing it to retard a little bit. And so you lose the battery life. So you have to really consider the environmental impact of just not only hot, cold, wet conditions. There could be situations where, again, that noise, vibration, all of the things that you want to achieve, those all have impacts. So you really have to consider every one of these and ask the right questions, figure out what's going to work best for the environment that it's going to be in.
Yeah, and you mentioned chemicals. So exposure to chemicals, on the floor not only impacts the bearings, but if you know the different types of material that your caster is made of, they're all going to react differently to this depending on the type
exactly.
of chemical. So again, understanding and knowing and being aware is very important. I would also say that the processes that you have to make sure you're aware of what processes these are going to be working in. Is it a production? Is it a clean room? Is it manufacturing? Like I mentioned earlier, manufacturing is never, and clean room are about total opposite ends of the spectrum. And, I've seen people do this, and it's been a nightmare where they took a vehicle that they sell into clean rooms because it hit the price point. They sold it into an assembly line manufacturing environment, and it did not work. And the customer's like, why doesn't it work? Well, your casters, your wheels, all that, it didn't fit the environment, the processes that around it.
Yeah, there's always the processes that you got to look at. I had a situation where they needed an ESD wheel, electrostatic to dissipate the charge, right? It was electronics application. And so, of course, there's the aspect of, sure, I can do that. That's not a problem. But there's two ways to do an electrostatic wheel, and that's either to ground it with a chain, or you add filaments, or you add some fibers to the wheel or to the tread material itself, and that's what causes the anti-static feature. Well, by doing so, it introduces a different tread material, right? The shore changes, it changes how it behaves, and so we found a loss in performance of efficiency. But that's something that you wouldn't think about by just asking, hey, I just need an ESD wheel. So you really got to think about the process of what you're going to be engaging that AGV in before you start to go down the path of which one's going to be the best solution.
100%. I think another big one, and Wes, as an end user yourself, I talked about safety being at the forefront of everything we do. And I think as a end user, safety is at the forefront for our clients as well. So you have to make sure that whatever caster you're specifying or putting onto your carts or vehicles meets whatever safety regulations are out there. And they're constantly updating these all the time. So making sure you're aware of that. Are there standards around your environmental hazard area or whatever, even a noise reduction, they have some standards. So I'm pretty sure, Wes, when you're looking at this, you want to make sure that everyone's complying with standards as well.
Yeah, that's a major factor when we do design an AGV, is to look at all the safety regulations when we do spec the vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, I say everybody, but I know that the F45 committee for AGVs, right, they get together and they look at the overall aspect of the AGV and how it interacts with everything around. But us at ICWM go more granular than that. We look at how is it going to affect the different situations. We have testing methods that look at brake mechanisms, for example. We have test mechanisms that look at load ratings. We really strive on the safety feature because any of these things can potentially harm or hurt another individual if you're not considering all of the different aspects.
And then I think, and up here, cost of maintenance. It's one that's highly overlooked, but it's probably one of the most important things you can consider. You look at your total cost of ownership. This is a big bottom line because you need to consider the cost of, not only what's the cost of the wheel, right, but what's the cost to replace it? What's the maintenance cost to maintain it? This is something that's not magic. It actually you have to do maintenance, you have to replace them, and there's a cost to it. So you need to be considering that when you're looking at a project and total cost of ownership. Don't overlook the caster piece because that's still a very important part. So it's going to wear. It's a wear and tear item. And most times, I'll tell you Wes can tell you this too, wear and tear items don't come into play when there's a warranty. So that's why it's even more important, since it's not covered under warranty. You got to get it right the first time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, a caster, a wheel is no different than the tires on your car. Eventually, you're going to have to replace them. And so everything that you do, balancing the tires, right, putting air in them, making sure they're rotated, right, all of those things are similar, right? We have to, as a maintenance preventive, is you got to make sure that the grease and the bearings are constantly lubricated, up to date. You need to look at the treads. Are they wearing wrong? Or is it something that the frame is bent and that's why you're getting maybe a flutter? Maybe you're getting a misalignment of tracking as the AGV goes down. So those are little things to pay attention to, because ultimately there's a maintenance and there's a cost associated to do that. while a caster may be cheap to say, look, I can give you a wheel that has a roller bearing or a plain bore that has no bearing in it. Sure, that's cheap, but what is it going to cost you in downtime? What is the maintenance going to be versus putting a precision bearing in it? A lot of times I see drive wheels, people think that's where you got to spend your money in drive wheels. Okay, well, sure, that's part of it. But then you have like the corner wheels that really don't have a motor in it or cogs or anything. They just swivel around. They just help support the whole AGV. Well, those swivels have either a upper raceway and a bottom raceway. They're the way they're manufactured. But if you put a precision bearing in that swivel, you just increase the efficiency by 30%. So while it may not seem much when it swivels from left to right, if you have a standard raceway versus a precision bearing, you can increase your safety feature. You can increase the efficiency. And you don't have to worry about lubricating that anymore. That bearing is a sealed bearing, welded inside. You don't see it, and it stays swiveling all the time. So simple things like that, while it may save you on the front end, long term, not having to get down on your knees, grease it, put them up, take it out of service, I think will total cost of ownership, as Brian said, is what you got to look at.
Yep.
I just want to comment one more on the safety thing.
Yep.
I'm not sure everybody, if you do, when you test AGVs, your safety features. Well, if you have a slow stop in your field set, but if you do a hard stop, you actually test how far does that AGV slide. You got to make sure it does actually stop, and how long does it take to stop, and that caster can make a difference on that safety feature as well.
Thank you, guys. All right, we'll continue. Wes, can you go into some examples that you see out as our end user?
Okay. So I've done multiple AGV projects and kind of had one to start with that the vendor basically just threw a caster on there. These were 6,000 pound AGVs. And what we learned through that process, of course, we had bearing failures, caster failures. I mean, everything we had issues with. But then we found out our guys weren't maintaining them. As you can see in the picture on the top right, our environment in Shaw Industries, we have a yarn, which we make carpet. Well, that yarn is everywhere. It's on the floor. People don't pick it up. Well, what happens to that yarn? The wheel, it gets sucked up in the wheel and it gets in the bearing. Well, that's going to cause your bearings to fail. So we learned a lot from that project. Shape of the wheel itself has a big factor on how the debris is picked up. So we actually worked on a caster or wheel that actually we had it kind of an arc in the top of it. It was kind of a rounded, not flat. Flat wheels tend to suck up more debris.
Or surface contact.
That's it. It's about the surface contact. So we learned that even. But you can also see from the pictures, we put scrapers on some of the wheels to make sure they kept clean. We put brushes in front of the AGVs to keep that debris out from under the AGVs. But one of the big things we really haven't talked about is what does that caster wheel touch? The floor. One thing people really forget about is that floor on the AGV and the surface. We had issues where you go between a joint. All those joints creates when you hit that with your caster, the AGV doesn't change paths the way we do it. It stays on that same path. It hits that joint over and over and over. We've had them fail based upon hitting these divots in the floor. So epoxy, you just really have to look at the floor condition overall to make sure that your wheels stay intact, and that maintenance. PM practices are really crucial as well. So what that project did, we actually had to go and replace all our casters with a different type from that original. And it wasn't crazy expensive, but it does add costs that you don't think of up front. So.
Thank you, Wes. Here's some key takeaways that I was going to ask everybody to kind of expand on. Brian?
Yeah, so, I mean, we kind of talked about, casters playing a vital role in the AGV AMR mobility. And I think that's kind of what we wanted to highlight here today is that the reason the Mobile Automation Group is partnering with the Alvar and the Caster Group is because they are important. They're important to the success of mobile robots. They're important to the success of the industry, really. And I think they're just way too far overlooked, afterthought, last minute. Oh yeah, we should probably put some casters on this, right? But for the mobile automation group, we're starting to look at this more seriously and making sure our OEMs are looking at it more seriously as well, because it is a necessary part in order to be able to navigate a warehouse or a facility and do it properly. We have to have the right casters. It's gonna have a huge impact, hopefully positive if you get the right one,
Yes.
on your overall performance, efficiency, and your reliability of there. So, Alvar, anything?
Yeah, no, I mean, remember, think of this. I gave the example of this is like a tire on your car. Just like there's different brands of tires, you know which ones are good and you know which ones are not so good. They're rated at different mileages. So it's kind of thinking that same concept is you could request casters and different wheels performance wise to be put on something that you're going to purchase. And when you're looking at how a design of an AGV or any mobile robot will happen, you got to consider everything we've really talked about. And it shouldn't be an afterthought, as Brian said. So many times we get applications where the envelope is already set. I already have the base. I already have exactly how I want it. I just need you to fit a caster inside of there. Well, sometimes it's not that easy without affecting the overall performance. I had a situation where, we had that happen, and well, the swivel radius inside of the platform I was given was not adequate enough, which means that I now have to do a custom offset. And with the custom offset, it fluttered more, right? Because the more offset you have, the less possibility you have of that caster fluttering. So the closer you bring that offset, it's hard to explain the offset. It's the middle of where a kingpin goes to where the axle is at. That's what's considered the offset, that difference. And so that affects the swivel radius. So as I said, when I was given the envelope, I had to reduce an offset, and we ended up with a lot of flutter. And there was no way to solve that. That's a feature of that cart. So you really got to take into account, not just take into account at the very beginning, working with the manufacturer, working with the caster design to make sure that it meets what you're looking for.
I just want to make a comment on that. Your navigation method is crucial as well, because like you mentioned about the flutter, if you're not staying on track and those you're having issues, you're going off, I don't say off path, but you're going to have low navigation, and your AGV is going to alarm and it's going to basically stop. So that's a big factor as far as how they work in conjunction with your navigation system as well.
Exactly. And if you have long runs in a certain warehouse, there are other casters that can switch between being a swivel to a directional and instantaneously, whether that's electronic means or by manual mean, they can switch, which allows them to track even better than it was if it's swerving up. I don't know if you've ever been to IKEA, but IKEA makes these carts that have 4 swivels, and so it's pretty hard to guide that thing as you go along. Whereas a cart at any other normal store tracks pretty straight. It's the same concept, right? If you have more swivels, I can switch from a swivel to a directional instantaneously. Now I'm tracking straight.
Yeah, so mobility, the design, and then again, like we said, the load capacity. These are all critical, right? So it really impacts your lifespan. It impacts the cost of your maintenance, and it can even impact the people in the environment that have to work with these things. And again, you got to think about everything, because people are still our greatest asset in the environment out there today. If they're frustrated with what they have to work with, they don't want to work with it anymore. So when you think about those little things, that's when you really start to get ahead of the curves. So.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah, we talked about maintenance. I think Alvar and Wes hit on that really well. And we talked about, I think we even talked about some unique applications where you have to make sure you have the right casters it's going to fit that unique application, whether it be the floor material, whether it be the chemicals around that you're working with.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, I mean,
everything
Wes
has-
hit it right. I mean, they decided we need to put some kind of brush guard in their application, right? You may not have thread yarn lying around, so that may not be an issue for you. But, this was a unique situation to brush that out of the way so that, you don't have it twirling up on the bearing. So